I remember her eyes. Cold, focused. Amanda didn't flinch when she extended her arm. She didn't scream. She didn't gasp. Just one smooth motion, a push. And then air swallowed me whole. The sky above me cracked open, and the cliff beneath me vanished. They would say I slipped, that my old legs failed me. But I remember her hand, the weight behind it. Amanda, my daughter-in-law, sent me over the edge. I didn't scream, not because I didn't want to, but because there wasn't time. The wind cut past my ears. My coat flapped like a bird caught in a storm. I saw sky, then rock, then sky again. I hit the ledge hard. Pain didn't come right away. Just silence, and the kind of cold that seeps into bone. For a moment I thought I was dead, but I wasn't. Not yet. They had brought wine. Amanda packed cheddar olives, smoked turkey, all my favorites. There were only 2 glasses. I was not meant to drink. Dean smiled too much that morning. His hand gripped my elbow too tightly when he helped me down from the truck. Amanda wore hiking boots that hadn't seen a single trail. Everything had been planned, and I had seen none of it. Not until it was too late. Now I lay on a ledge halfway down a cliff, blood drying against my scalp, shoulder twisted at an angle no arm should bend. I couldn't move much, but I wasn't dead. Not yet. I don't know how long I lay there. Time melted into the sound of wind. At some point, I heard them above me. Faint voices. Dean, Amanda. She must have lost her footing, Amanda said. Calm, rehearsed. Dean mumbled something. I couldn't hear it. They didn't climb down, didn't call for help. They waited. Then they left. I closed my eyes and let the lie settle into my bones. By morning, I remembered the old phone in my coat. A flip phone, emergency only. I clicked a button, static. Then a voice, faint, old, but real. A man named Hank answered, a volunteer trail medic. By noon, he reached me. He didn't ask what happened, just carried me like I was made of paper. In the hospital, I told them I fell. No police came, no questions. 2 days later, a nurse brought in a local paper. Ivy Turlow. Loving widow, passed peacefully. My name, my photo. Amanda had submitted the obituary. They had buried me, alive. That was the moment I decided if they wanted me dead, they'd have to see what survival looked like, and I would show them. 3 days after I read my own obituary, I walked out of the hospital. My arm was in a sling, my leg wrapped in a brace. I walked with a limp that would never leave me, but I was walking, and that mattered. Hank, the trail medic, offered to take me home. I told him I didn't have a home anymore. Instead, I asked him to drop me 2 towns over, somewhere no one would look. That first night in the motel, I didn't sleep. The room smelled like mildew and old cigarettes. The flicker of the TV felt like company. I sat in the dark, trying to make sense of what had happened, of who I had been to them. A mother, an obstacle, a signature. I was grieving something deeper than betrayal. I was grieving erasure. At the pharmacy down the road, I bought a burner phone, cheap, disposable. I called myself Esther, a name I plucked from a childhood novel. I watched from the shadows as Amanda and Dean prepared to bury me. The obituary had been efficient. Ivy Turlow, loving widow, passed peacefully in her home. No mention of the fall. No investigation. Just quiet erasure. The funeral was set for Sunday. Closed casket. I would be watching. I called the only person I trusted, Iris. We hadn't spoken in years. She used to be my friend before Amanda arrived, before Dean forgot who raised him. I didn't expect warmth. I expected silence. But when she answered the phone and heard my voice, she didn't ask how. She just asked one word. Where? Sunday morning came like a storm holding its breath. Iris met me behind the chapel near the maintenance doors. She brought me her late husband's cap and a pair of oversized sunglasses. I wore a scarf to hide the sling. We didn't hug. She handed me a flash drive, the file I had asked her to prepare. A recording. Dean and Amanda, whispering late one night, captured by an old baby monitor I had kept on during chemo. A habit, one that turned into evidence. "You're the beneficiary now, aren't you?" Amanda had said. "She's not going to be around much longer. Enough to make their lies shatter." Inside the chapel, the mourners sat politely. Amanda was in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Dean looked like a man barely holding himself upright. The casket sat untouched, polished. A performance. I stayed near the lobby where a slideshow screen had been set up. A young woman was preparing a tribute. I walked up smiling softly. "I'm Ivy's cousin," I said. "May I play a short message?" She nodded. I plugged in the flash drive and walked away. Their voices filled the chapel. Amanda's laugh, Dean's nervous mutter, then Amanda again. "Don't you think 10 million is enough to start over?" The room gasped. Someone stood. The priest froze mid-sentence. I stood behind the wall, eyes closed, and I smiled. It had begun. I didn't return to the motel right away. Iris drove us down the old county road in silence. The audio still echoed in my head, their voices cold, calculating, but I felt no anger. Not yet. Only resolve. Back at the motel, I didn't sleep. I watched shadows crawl across the ceiling. My fingers curled around the notebook Iris had left me. That night, I wrote the first sentence. They buried me, but I was still breathing. In the morning, I walked 3 blocks to the public library. No one recognized me. Not as Ivy. Not as the dead woman. I logged into a guest computer. I searched Amanda's name, Dean's, my own obituary. The funeral video had been posted to a local Facebook group, Inheritance Watch. Someone had filmed the screen during the service. It wasn't viral, but it had spread. Most comments were furious. How could they get away with this? That woman still alive? Others called it fake. Conspiracy? Theater. But I wasn't here for opinions. I was here for movement. And Amanda was already trying to erase the noise. I saw it in the edits. Her social media accounts were being wiped clean, old photos removed, captions edited. Dean's name began to disappear from comments. I traced the digital trail like a ghost watching her own crime scene. She was trying to control the narrative, but I had already slipped through. I started collecting documents. First a copy of the original will, then the insurance policy, the one still listing me as primary beneficiary. When I called the law firm, I used a new name, Marion Kessler. Amanda had submitted an amendment, they said, but it wasn't notarized. She had tried to rewrite the ending, but the ink was still mine. Iris helped me pull property records. My house was already listed for sale. The listing said estate transfer. No mention of heirs, no mention of fraud. They were moving fast, too fast. I was running out of time. Iris made a call to a woman named Lynette, an estate attorney, quiet, sharp, direct. When I met her, I told her everything. About the cliff, the silence, the casket, the lie. She listened without blinking, then asked a single question. "Do you want them prosecuted or removed?" I said removed. She nodded. That was easier. We worked quickly. Lynette filed a motion to revoke Amanda's control over the estate. She attached the funeral video, the audio recording the original documents. By sunrise the next day, a judge issued a temporary freeze. The house was pulled off the market, the accounts locked. Amanda's lawyer dropped her. I stood at the window of my motel room, watching the sunrise pour through plastic blinds. For the first time, I felt the story shifting. I was no longer a ghost. I was the watcher. The judge granted me one visit, a single court-approved access to retrieve my belongings. The conditions were clear. No confrontation, no contact with Amanda or Dean, no statements. Just go and collect what was mine and leave. I asked Iris to drive me. She didn't ask why. She just pulled up in her quiet sedan, eye steady, silence ready. We turned onto my old street. The trees looked taller, or maybe I had grown smaller. The house stood there too familiar and too distant all at once. It was still painted the same shade of pale green Robert and I had picked out 20 years ago, but the shutters hung slightly off kilter. The flower beds were dead. My rose bushes, the ones I trimmed every spring, were overrun with weeds. There was still a wreath on the door, one I had made 3 Christmases ago, my initials stitched into it. Amanda had left it up, maybe for show, maybe to soften the listing photos, maybe because guilt can look like nostalgia. A county official unlocked the door for me. Amanda wasn't there. Neither was Dean. Just the cold. The thermostat had been turned down so low I could see my breath. The silence inside wasn't peaceful. It was stripped hollow. Every photo of me was gone. The hallway where we had hung Robert's portrait, empty. The frame that once held Dean's graduation photo, gone. Even the painting of my mother that used to rest above the den fireplace had vanished. The house had been edited like a manuscript with me erased. I walked through each room slowly, as if the walls might still remember me. The mirror in the dining room still had the crack from Thanksgiving, 10 years ago. Dean and I had argued about Amanda's first real estate deal. I remember slamming the sideboard a little too hard. The glass had splintered but held, just like me. In the bedroom, the closet was half open. My clothes gone. But near the nightstand, I spotted them, my old wool slippers, the ones I used to wear on sick days. Amanda hadn't thrown them away. She hadn't donated them either. Just overlooked them. Forgotten. I didn't take them. I didn't take anything. Downstairs, I found a box. My name written on it in permanent marker, but not in my handwriting. Inside, my high school yearbook. A lock of Dean's baby hair tied with a blue ribbon. A journal from my chemo days, its pages filled with shaky, half-legible thoughts about fear, hope, and gratitude. Amanda had packed it. She hadn't burned my past, just boxed it up, tucked it where she wouldn't have to see it. Hidden grief, hidden guilt. On my way out, I paused by the kitchen. They had replaced the old table, new chairs, no more scuff marks, no more grooves from the plastic tablecloth I used to pin down with rubber bands. But something caught my eye. On the fridge, a yellow sticky note faded, curling at the edges. In my handwriting, "Call Mom about the insurance forms." Amanda hadn't noticed it. I pulled it down, folded it, and slipped it into my coat pocket. Not for sentiment, for memory, for proof that I had once lived there, once mattered. Iris didn't ask how it went. She just looked at me as I climbed into the car. Her eyes didn't need questions. Mine didn't need answers. We didn't drive back to the motel. We had one more stop. Lynette had prepared everything. Legal papers, new identity records, transfer forms. I signed it all under my new name, Marion Kessler. Then I requested the estate be placed in a trust, a sealed one no one else could touch. Amanda had played her hand too early. Now it was my turn. That night, I sat on the motel bed holding a folder of signed documents. The room hummed with quiet electricity, as if the walls themselves were catching their breath. This wasn't victory. It was reclamation. And that was enough for now. Lynette called me 2 days after the papers were signed. Her voice was sharp, precise, like a blade honed on restraint. "The judge has approved the freeze," she said, effective immediately. Every account Amanda tried to access, every line of credit, every asset tied to the estate, locked. Amanda had played the game with arrogance. She hadn't expected me to still be holding the rules. That morning, the bank flagged a $50,000 withdrawal attempt from Amanda. When they told her the account was frozen, she screamed, not confusion fury. She threatened to sue, claimed fraud. Lynette recorded the call. Later that evening, she sent me the transcript. I read it 3 times. Not for legal reasons, but to remember. To remember how easy it was for Amanda to weaponize calm words and fake smiles. How little she hesitated to destroy. It wasn't just what she did. It was how little she cared after. The next day, I stood on the porch of my reclaimed house. No furniture, no curtains. But it was mine. The wind scraped against the old porch swing. The house creaked like it was slowly exhaling after holding its breath too long. I wasn't rebuilding yet, but I was present. That evening, I got a message from Iris. Amanda's accounts are being investigated, it read. Also this. Attached was a screenshot of Amanda's Facebook. The photos were gone. Her name had been removed from job listings. Comments flooded in, some angry, others gleeful. The town had started whispering. Dean had gone silent. His company deactivated his work badge. Someone had sent an anonymous report to HR. Rumors moved faster than the law. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. I still woke up reaching for painkillers before memory. Still checked the door twice at night. Still felt Amanda's push when the wind blew too hard behind me. I didn't want revenge. I wanted distance. But distance comes at a cost. And I was ready to pay. Lynette scheduled a court-approved access, one that gave me not just legal standing, but recognition. I wasn't a missing person anymore. I was a survivor with paper proof. The mail came in thick envelopes now. Court records, statements, offers from journalists that I ignored. I wasn't a headline. I was history reasserting itself. That night, I slept on the floor of the empty bedroom wrapped in an old quilt Iris had brought me. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, I was warm. The courthouse smelled like dust and old files. I hadn't stepped into one in over 40 years, not since Robert's will had been read. But this time, it wasn't grief that brought me here. It was reclamation. Lynette met me at the back entrance. She wore navy blue, a folder tucked beneath her arm like a shield. She didn't ask if I was ready, just nodded and walked beside me. We moved through quiet hallways. No reporters, no cameras, no family. Just justice stripped down to silence and time. Amanda and Dean were already seated when I entered the courtroom. Dean looked like a shadow of the boy I once read bedtime stories to. His shoulders sagged. His hair grayed prematurely. He didn't look at me. Amanda looked. Her face was smooth, composed, not a single line out of place. But her eyes flinched. Only once. But I saw it. The judge, a woman in her late 50s, appeared calm but firm, the kind who had seen hundreds of lies dressed in Sunday clothes. She glanced at the files Lynette submitted, then at me. No surprise, no pity, just recognition. Lynette opened with precision. She laid out the timeline. The fall, the fake obituary, the forged amendment, the funeral footage, the bank withdrawals, the deleted photos, the missing contact with authorities, the insurance letter declaring me dead signed before the death certificate was even filed. Then she played the recording. Amanda's voice clear and cold. Don't you think 10 million is enough to start over? Amanda's lawyer stood next. He was young, confident, too rehearsed. He called me emotionally unstable, said I disappeared on purpose, faked my fall, fabricated grief, accused me of manipulating Dean, of harboring resentment, of recording conversations out of paranoia. He gestured toward me, as if I was a ghost on trial for haunting her own house. But the judge didn't blink. Then Dean took the stand. His voice trembled. Not from fear, from unraveling. He said Amanda thought I had left out of spite, that I refused to let go of the past, that I made everyone walk on eggshells. When Lynette asked why they submitted a death certificate 2 weeks later if they believed I was alive, he hesitated, stammered, swallowed. Amanda clenched her jaw. Her heel tapped once, then stopped. When Amanda took the stand, she smiled too much, said it was all misunderstood, that the audio was out of context, that she was overwhelmed, unstable, not malicious. But Lynette had one final document. The letter Amanda had written to the insurance company, dated 3 days before the death certificate, declaring me deceased, with banking info attached. The courtroom didn't gasp. It went silent. And silence was louder than anything. The judge didn't take a recess. She spoke clearly. Amanda and Dean had engaged in willful fraudulent misrepresentation. Their control over the estate was revoked immediately. All accounts returned to the primary holder, Marion Kessler. Amanda stood before the ruling was finished. She stormed out, heels clicking like breaking glass. Dean remained seated, didn't cry, didn't move, didn't look at me. Outside, Lynette handed me a sealed envelope. Inside, the judge's order, stamped. Final. I held it with both hands, the fingers trembling, not with fear, with weight, with history. That night, I sat in my motel room and placed the ruling beside my notebook. Then I turned off the lights. And for the first time in months, I slept. The house didn't feel like mine, even after the ruling. It echoed differently. Every room had been emptied of warmth. Even the kitchen, once filled with the scent of thyme and rosemary, now held only dust. But I wasn't there to dwell. I was there to rebuild, not what was, but what could be. That decision came the same night I unpacked the old photos Dean had returned. They were curled at the edges, worn thin in places. One showed him on the roof of the garage, eating a melted popsicle beside me. We were both laughing. I didn't cry. I just knew. The house couldn't be a tomb. It had to become something more. The next morning, I called Lynette. I want to convert the estate, I said. To what? A sanctuary. For women. For survivors. She didn't ask why. She didn't hesitate. She simply said, I'll begin the paperwork. Renovations began quietly. I kept one bedroom and a kitchenette for myself. The rest I gave away. We stripped the old wallpaper, pulled up the ruined carpets, repainted the walls in soft greens and golds. A small library took form where the den used to be. The basement became a resource room. The upstairs guest rooms were converted into private living spaces. Clean beds, warm lamps, locks on every door for security, not isolation. I hired local women, many of them single, overlooked like I had once been. They painted, hammered, repaired. I watched day by day as the house filled with new breath. It didn't hurt less, but it made sense. Lynette connected me with a nonprofit for women who'd survived financial abuse and emotional control. The women arrived with little more than a duffel bag, a coat, and silence. That silence, I recognized it. They didn't talk the first few days, and I didn't ask. I cooked soup, left books on nightstands, played soft music through the halls. The quiet wasn't emptiness. It was space. And slowly they filled it. One left wildflowers in a glass jar by the front door. Another slipped a quote beside the stairwell. There is no statute of limitations on healing. Someone repainted the back wall with trees and windows that opened onto sky. Life was coming back. And so was I. One evening after dishes had been cleared, Carla, a woman in her 50s with hands rough from factory work, sat beside me near the fire. I never imagined I'd end up here, she said. I nodded. I hadn't either. No tears, no pity. just understanding. Amanda had wanted my death to be an eraser. Instead, it became a blueprint. A few days later, I filed the final paperwork. The estate was now a registered community trust. No name on the gate. No photos on the walls. Just stories written in steam from kitchen pots and scratchy handwriting on shared notebooks. And every day the silence grew softer. Peace never announces itself. It arrives like a pause after too much noise, not triumphant, not loud, just present. That morning the house smelled of rising bread. Someone had left a basket of apples on the porch. A volunteer was cleaning the garden path. Inside, Carla was folding laundry. I was sitting in the small sunroom sorting documents for the shelter trust when Lynette walked in. She didn't knock. She just stood in the doorway, her face tight. Ivy, she said, not Marion, not legal formality, just Ivy. She held out her phone like it was something burning through her hand. I took it. The headline was short, direct. Amanda Kessler, arrested in Phoenix, wire fraud insurance scheme, multiple aliases. A mugshot followed. Amanda's face barely recognizable, her hair flat, her skin blotched with exhaustion, her eyes hollow, no denial, no defense, just exposure. I didn't feel vindicated, not right away. It was like watching a distant storm when I had once stood inside, now passed over someone else's field. I whispered, "It's done." But even as I said it, I knew that was only partly true. Dean came the next morning. He looked thinner, paler. He didn't ask to come in, just stood on the porch with a paper cup of coffee and an envelope. "She mailed it to my old office," he said. 2 weeks ago. The envelope was thick-sealed in Amanda's handwriting. He handed it to me, then stepped back. "I haven't read it," he said, "but I don't want to open it alone." We sat by the kitchen window. Dean opened the envelope slowly like it might explode. Inside was a letter. Amanda's voice all over again, a bitter composed and unraveling at the edges. She blamed the system. She blamed me. She blamed Dean. And buried somewhere in the middle was something close to apology. But it was the last line that silenced us both. "Love without leverage has never felt safe to me." Dean didn't speak for a long time. Then he walked to the window and watched the garden. When he finally turned back, his voice cracked. "I don't know how to forgive her," I answered quietly. "Maybe that's not the point anymore." That night, we burned the letter. Outside, the ashes scattered across the damp garden path. Carla came out to hang laundry. She didn't ask what we were doing. She just nodded once, as if she understood. The next few days passed quietly. I returned to my small room with the twin bed and the quilt Iris had sewn. I sorted more applications for the shelter stories of women who had been erased, discarded, like I had once been. No one mentioned Amanda, and for the first time, no part of me needed to. I went walking more often, sometimes alone, sometimes with Carla. The fog clung to the hills like soft lace. One morning she reached for my hand without saying anything. I let her. It wasn't comfort. It was solidarity. Amanda had been a storm, but she wasn't the sky, and the sky had cleared. Fall arrived early that year. The mornings turned crisp. Leaves browned at the edges before falling like quiet decisions. I took to walking at dawn, the fog low and the silence comfortable. One afternoon, Lynette called. The firm that handled Robert's investments. "They reached out," she said. I hadn't heard that name aloud in months. "They said there's one final matter." My stomach tightened, unsure if it was fear closure or something in between. The attorney's office was warm and smelled faintly of paper and pine oil. The man behind the desk looked younger than Robert had been when he passed. He slid a folder across to me without ceremony. "This was dated a week before your husband died." I opened it. Inside was a letter. Robert's handwriting. Familiar? steady, a little wobbly on the corners like he had written it with aching hands. He had known, not everything, but enough. Enough to be cautious, enough to plan. In the letter he spoke about Amanda, how her questions about money had grown too pointed, how Dean, eager for approval, had grown too pliable. He didn't accuse, he observed. Then he wrote something I didn't expect. If you're reading this, then what I feared came close to happening. He had set up a fallback clause in the trust, one that bypassed any signatures from future executors, one that made me and only me the sole holder. The 10 million, it was still there, untouched, waiting. I closed the folder and exhaled so deeply I surprised myself. Years of fear-lost betrayal, and somewhere beneath it all, Robert had been looking out for me. Not with flowers, not with speeches, but with a quiet, unshakable belief that I mattered, even after death. I didn't call Dean, didn't tell Iris, didn't say anything. I just drove back up the ridge road as the sun began to lower a soft gold that bathed the old fence posts and the crooked mailbox. For the first time, it felt like my home again. The next morning, I began the process of converting the fund. Not for the house, not for myself, for the women. I called it the Langford Legacy Fund, named not for me, but for my mother, the woman who taught me to pay bills on time and keep receipts, who made stew for neighbors even when we had little, who never asked for credit. It would be a scholarship fund for women over 60, women who had been erased, who had started over late, who had been told they were too old, too foolish, too invisible, but still stood. Every week letters poured in, some typed, some handwritten, some scrawled on napkins. Stories that mirrored mine, not in detail, but in ache. A woman who lost her pension after a partner forged her signature. Another whose children sold her house while she was in hospice. One who hadn't spoken out loud in weeks, but whispered into the envelope before sealing it, hoping someone would hear. I read every one, not to fix them, but to witness them, because that, I had learned, was the first kind of salvation to be seen. Dean visited sometimes. He never brought up Amanda. He didn't try to explain. He just helped in quiet ways, retiling a loose stair, bringing lemons from a tree he'd planted. Some days he stayed for tea. Others he simply nodded and left. I didn't forgive him, but I no longer flinched when he entered the room. That was something. I didn't need Amanda's apology. I didn't need revenge. What I had was better, legacy, and this time it wasn't built on silence. It was built on purpose. Peace isn't a parade. It's not a headline, not a trophy, not even a loud declaration. It's the soft click of the front door locking at night and knowing no one else has the key. It's a woman sitting by a window, watching the steam rise from a cup of tea and not flinching when she hears footsteps. It's not revenge. It's breathing. Freely, fully, finally. A year passed. The house changed, but not all at once. New paint dulled slightly under the sun. The mural out back faded at the corners, but still opened into imagined skies. The shelter became more than a house. It became a rhythm. Some women stayed a few weeks, others months. One never left. She now teaches art in the library 2 evenings a week, her laughter echoing through the halls. No one asked about the past. We all carried it quietly like old keys to doors we no longer entered. One day a small envelope arrived. No return address. Inside a single photo, Amanda, in an orange jumpsuit, her hair cut short, her eyes blank. Nothing written. I placed it in the drawer where I kept old court documents. Not as a souvenir, as a warning. Some storms come back if you forget they ever passed. Dean visited the next day. He didn't mention the photo. I didn't show it. He fixed a loose step on the back porch. Then, standing with sawdust on his sleeves, he finally said something he hadn't, before I never knew who I was without someone telling me. I looked at him, not as a man who'd betrayed me, but as a boy who never learned how to be anything but dependent. "You get to find out now," I said. He nodded. Not with shame, but something close to hope. That spring, I planted rosemary in the back garden, the same kind Robert once grew. Same patch, same soil. The women helped. Carla brought compost. Another brought music, an old radio with a broken dial that only played jazz. We laughed. We sweated. We dug our fingers into the dirt and didn't apologize for the mess. It wasn't gardening. It was grounding. One evening, as twilight slipped into the corners of the house, I sat alone in the reading nook with my notebook. It was nearly full now. I read the first line I ever wrote. They buried me, but I was still breathing. And beneath it, I added one more. Now I'm blooming. That was it. No grand finale, no final showdown, just a woman, a notebook, a garden, a legacy, and a house full of light. Because sometimes surviving isn't enough. Sometimes we rebuild, quietly, stubbornly, unapologetically.